It was a forgotten photograph that started everything. Funny how something so small can crack the foundation of a life you thought was unshakable. That morning, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for my old passport. Melissa and I had planned a last-minute trip to Mexico for New Year's, her idea. She had been unusually insistent about it, too. "We need this, Danny," she said, squeezing my hand in that soft way she always did when she wanted to convince me of something. A chance to reconnect. I agreed without a second thought. The passport was in a box under our bed, mixed in with other things we'd thrown together over the years. Old concert tickets, love notes from our early days, and the remnants of a life that felt both familiar and alien now. I flipped through the stack quickly, not really thinking, until I saw the photo. It was from 6 months ago, a picture taken at my company's summer barbecue. Melissa and I were front and center, laughing together, beers in hand. Perfect moment, frozen in time. But it wasn't the two of us in the photo that caught my attention. It was the man standing a few feet away, staring at her. He was wearing sunglasses, but you could tell where his gaze landed. Not on the crowd, not on the food, not on anyone else. On her. And Melissa wasn't oblivious. Her body language in the photo, leaning slightly in his direction, that tilt of her head, spoke volumes. I didn't notice it then, but looking at it now, it felt obvious. I should have dismissed it as paranoia, a trick of perspective, but something about it stuck in my mind. When I asked her about it later that evening, showing her the photo with a casual, "Hey, do you remember this guy?" her reaction set off an alarm I couldn't ignore. She froze. It was subtle, but I saw it. A flicker of something, recognition, maybe guilt, flashed across her face before she quickly smoothed it over with a laugh. "Oh, him? That's just one of your colleagues, right? I think he asked me where the bathrooms were or something." "Why?" I shrugged, playing it off. "No reason. Just curious." But my instincts screamed otherwise. I've never been the jealous type. I prided myself on trusting Melissa, giving her the space she needed. Yet, as the days went on, I couldn't shake the image of that man or the way Melissa reacted to my question. It was like finding the corner of a loose thread on a sweater. You know you shouldn't pull, but you can't help yourself. The unraveling began 2 days later. Melissa left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she showered. Normally, I wouldn't even glance at it, but this time, the notification caught my eye. "Meet me at 7. Same place as last time." My stomach dropped. It wasn't her usual email, her usual tone. My hands shook as I clicked on the message. It was from an account I didn't recognize, signed only with the letter J. The email haunted me. Same place as last time. The words danced in my mind, heavy with implication. Couldn't ignore it, not this time. For years, I believed in Melissa's honesty, her charm, the life we had built together. But now, every memory felt like it was written in vanishing ink, the truth dissolving under scrutiny. I sat at the counter, the cursor hovering over the reply button. My heart raced as I considered my next move. Do I confront her? Demand answers right now? Or do I wait, watch, and let her dig her own grave? The thought of deception, of betrayal, felt like swallowing broken glass. I made a decision. I needed to know the truth, but I had to be smart about it. Clicking on the email address, I traced the sender's profile. The name attached was James K. A name that meant nothing to me, but the thread had been pulled. And when I went further, logging into our shared phone account to check call logs, something I had never felt compelled to do before, it all started to unravel. His number popped up over and over again. Calls during the day when I was at work, at night when she said she was working late. Even while we were sitting on the couch together, she would excuse herself to the other room and call him. I felt like a fool. That night, I couldn't look at her. Melissa came home around 9 p.m., her excuse a flimsy story about a last-minute client meeting. She kissed my cheek, but it felt wrong, cold. I mumbled something about being tired and went to bed early. In truth, I lay there awake, heart pounding, replaying every suspicious moment from the past 6 months. The late nights, the new lingerie she said she bought for herself, the sudden interest in fitness classes she never seemed to actually attend. And then there was the man in the photo. Couldn't be coincidence. I needed to know if it was him, the one sending the emails, making the calls. So I waited. The next day, I told her I had a work dinner and wouldn't be home until late. It was a lie, one that tasted bitter coming out of my mouth, but it gave me the freedom to watch her without her knowing. At 6:30 p.m., Melissa left the house in a hurry, dressed in a sleek black dress I'd never seen before. She didn't say where she was going, just a quick, "Don't wait up," as she grabbed her purse. I followed her. My heart thundered as I kept a safe distance, my car crawling along the dimly lit streets. She drove across town to a trendy wine bar, the kind of place she used to beg me to take her to before life got busy. She parked, stepped out, and walked in like she owned the place. I waited a few minutes before following, slipping inside and scanning the room. That's when I saw him. He was tall, blonde, with an overconfident smirk plastered on his face. He was already seated at a table, a glass of wine in hand, watching Melissa as if she were the only person in the world. She slid into the seat across from him, leaning in close, laughing softly as he reached out to touch her arm. My stomach churned. Couldn't breathe. I didn't confront them, not yet. I snapped a photo with my phone, my hand shaking so badly the picture blurred. It didn't matter. The truth was undeniable now. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared at the picture. The man from the barbecue. The man from the emails. The man who was with my wife. I wasn't going to let this slide. For 2 days, I lived with the photo on my phone like it was a ticking time bomb. I avoided Melissa as much as I could, retreating into myself while she carried on as if nothing had changed. Every laugh, every glance, every casual touch from her felt like mockery. I wanted to scream, but I wasn't ready yet. Not until I had my moment. That moment came sooner than I expected. Melissa had planned a dinner party at our house, a gathering of friends, colleagues, and her usual crowd of networking contacts. She was in her element that night, flitting around the room in a flowing red dress, charming everyone with her effortless wit and radiant smile. Watching her felt surreal, like observing a stranger wearing her skin. I couldn't believe I had once been proud to call her mine. About halfway through the evening, while Melissa entertained a small circle in the living room, the front door opened, and in he walked. Him. The man from the wine bar, the emails, the barbecue photo. He was here in my house, acting as though he belonged. My blood turned to ice. He scanned the room with a self-assured grin, and when his eyes landed on Melissa, something unspoken passed between them. She stiffened for just a second before recovering, waving him over with a casual "James, you made it," as though they were just old acquaintances. Old acquaintances don't look at each other like that. I gripped my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. James wove through the crowd, greeting people as he made his way toward Melissa. She placed a hand on his arm when he reached her, laughing at something he said. It was intimate, too intimate. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my movements sharp and deliberate, and crossed the room toward them. The noise of the party faded into the background, replaced by the pounding of my pulse in my ears. When I reached them, Melissa turned, her expression faltering for a split second before she plastered on her usual smile. "Danny," she said brightly, "have you met James? He's one of my clients." "Cut the act, Melissa," I interrupted, my voice low but firm. The room felt like it tilted, all eyes suddenly on us. "I know who he is." James blinked, taken aback. Melissa's smile froze, then cracked, giving way to something darker. "What are you talking about?" she said, her tone icy now. "I'm talking about the emails," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady, my voice cold as steel. "The late-night calls. The wine bar 2 nights ago. Don't insult me by pretending I don't know." Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You've been spying on me?" she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Are you serious, Danny? You're paranoid. This is insane." "Insane," I snapped, my voice rising. "Insane is inviting your lover to our home, to our friends, and thinking I wouldn't notice." The room went dead silent. James took a step back, his confidence faltering under the weight of the scene. Melissa's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. James finally found his voice. "Hey man, I think you're misunderstanding." "Shut up," I said, pointing at him. My anger boiled over, Years of trust and love burning away in an instant. You don't get to talk. Not here. Not now. Melissa stepped in, her voice shrill. Danny, stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. This isn't what you think. Then tell me what it is, Melissa, I said, staring her down. Explain it. Explain the photos, the emails, the wine bar. Explain him. For a moment I thought she might actually try. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting between me and James. But then, something changed. Her expression hardened, her lips curling into a sneer. You want the truth? She spat, crossing her arms. Fine. Yes, James and I have been seeing each other. Are you happy now? You want to make this public? Let's air it all out. Maybe if you weren't so boring, so predictable, this wouldn't have happened. Her words hit like a sledgehammer. The room erupted into gasps, murmurs, the sound of chairs scraping as people awkwardly shifted. I stared at her, stunned into silence. Predictable, I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. I gave you everything, Melissa, everything. And this is how you repay me? She rolled her eyes, as if I was the unreasonable one. Don't act like you're some saint, Danny. You're just there. Always working, always playing the good husband. You don't excite me anymore. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just betrayal, it was utter contempt. I turned to James, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Get out, I said, my voice shaking with barely restrained fury. Get out of my house before I do something we'll both regret. He didn't argue. He muttered something under his breath, then turned and left, the door slamming behind him. I turned back to Melissa. You too, I said, my voice breaking. Get out. Now. Danny, be reasonable, she started, but I cut her off. I was reasonable, I said. For years I was reasonable. Not anymore. And with that, she grabbed her purse, muttering something about me being dramatic, and stormed out. The party broke up soon after. No one said much as they left. What could they say? I sat alone in the wreckage of our living room, surrounded by half-empty glasses and plates of uneaten food, wondering how the hell my life had turned into a stranger's nightmare. The silence after Melissa left was deafening. I sat on the couch, staring at the mess around me, unable to process what had just happened. The guests had scattered quickly, mumbling awkward apologies and well-meaning offers of support that I waved off without hearing. The house, once full of laughter and life, felt hollow, like a theater after the final curtain. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced, replaying her words, her sneer, the absolute lack of remorse in her confession. You don't excite me anymore. Those words echoed louder than any argument we'd ever had. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the disdain, the way she had thrown away everything we built together as if it were nothing. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into second-guessing myself. She'd betrayed me, humiliated me, and I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I didn't tell Melissa I was filing for divorce. I wanted that moment of control, of taking my life back, without her interference. He assured me we could handle it swiftly. There was no prenup, but that didn't matter to me at this point. I just wanted her out of my life. Later that day, Melissa called. I almost didn't pick up, but part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Maybe some twisted part of me still hoped for an apology, for her to show some kind of regret. Danny, she started, her voice smooth, rehearsed. I think we need to talk. Last night got out of hand. Out of hand, I repeated, my voice cold. That's how you describe admitting to cheating on me in front of all our friends? She sighed, the sound dripping with irritation. I didn't mean for it to come out that way. You ambushed me, Danny. What was I supposed to do? Lie? You've been lying for months? I shot back, anger flaring again. Don't pretend you were forced into anything. You've been carrying on with James, laughing behind my back while I trusted you. She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it again. But then she said something that shattered any lingering sympathy I had for her. You don't understand, she said, her tone shifting into something self-pitying. You're always so focused on being the perfect husband, the provider. I needed something more. James, He made me feel alive. Alive, I repeated, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? I gave you everything. I worked my ass off to make sure we had a good life, to make sure you had a good life. And you repay me by sleeping with some nobody? Don't insult him, she snapped, her voice sharp now. This isn't just about you, Danny. You never noticed how lonely I was. You were so busy being responsible, so predictable. James gave me what you couldn't. Respect, I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Loyalty? A shred of decency? She scoffed. You're impossible. I thought we could handle this like adults. But clearly, you're not ready to have a real conversation. I couldn't help but laugh. An ugly, bitter sound. A real conversation? You mean the one where you justify screwing someone else because I wasn't entertaining enough for you? No, Melissa. I think we're done talking. I hung up before she could respond, blocking her number immediately. It was petty, maybe, but I didn't care. I needed space. A moment to breathe without her poison infecting my thoughts. That evening, I started packing her things. It was cathartic, in a way. Every item I threw into a box, her clothes, her jewelry, the trinkets she collected from our trips, felt like shedding a layer of pain. When I came across the framed photo from our wedding day, I hesitated for a moment before tossing it in the box with the rest. That wasn't us anymore. Maybe it never had been. The final blow came the next day. James, because apparently his audacity knew no bounds, sent me a message. Hey man, sorry about how things went down. I didn't mean for you to find out that way. I hope we can be civil about this. Melissa deserves to be happy. I stared at the message, my hands trembling with rage. Melissa deserves to be happy? And what about me? Did I deserve the lies, the betrayal, the public humiliation? My chest tightened, and for a moment I considered replying, tearing into him with everything I had. But I didn't. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he had gotten under my skin. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer. Let him handle it. I was done playing the fool. As I sat there, staring at the empty boxes and the mess of a life that had unraveled in less than 48 hours, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The storm had passed. Now it was time to rebuild. But not for her. For me. Just when I thought I was starting to regain some control over my life, Melissa showed up at the house unannounced. It had been 3 days since our explosive confrontation at the party, and I'd gone out of my way to avoid her completely, blocking her number, unfollowing her on social media, and even asking mutual friends to keep their distance. It wasn't just about space. It was about survival. But Melissa, in her typical fashion, wasn't one to respect boundaries. I was in the middle of sorting through the mess she'd left behind, deciding what to donate and what to toss, when the knock on the door startled me. It wasn't tentative or hesitant. It was confident, sharp, like she had every right to be standing there. My stomach twisted as I walked to the door, bracing myself for whatever fresh hell she was about to unleash. When I opened it, there she was, perfectly composed, as if the last few days hadn't happened. Her red lipstick was flawless, her hair styled in those effortless waves that once made me weak. Now it just made me angry. She had a smug expression, like she already knew how this encounter would go. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my tone flat. "I need to talk to you," she said, pushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. Typical Melissa, always assuming the world would bend to her will. "There's nothing left to say," I said, shutting the door with more force than necessary. "You made your choices. Now live with them." She turned to face me, arms crossed, her lips curling into a smirk. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Danny. I came to clarify a few things." I laughed bitterly. "Clarify? What's there to clarify? You cheated. You lied. You humiliated me in front of everyone. What part of that needs explaining?" Her eyes flashed, and for a moment, I thought I saw guilt. But it was gone just as quickly, replaced by that icy, calculating demeanor I was starting to recognize all too well. "You think this is all black and white, don't you? Like I'm the villain and you're some innocent victim. But that's not how relationships work, Danny. We both made mistakes." I stared at her, incredulous. "Mistakes? Mistakes? You call carrying on with James behind my back a mistake?" "No, Melissa. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk." What you did was a calculated betrayal. She rolled her eyes, like I was the unreasonable one. You're so focused on what I did wrong that you're not even willing to admit your part in this. You ignored me, Danny. You made me feel invisible. I felt my anger flare again, hot and consuming. So that justifies what you did? You could have talked to me. You could have told me you were unhappy. Instead, you chose the coward's way out. Coward? She repeated, stepping closer, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how lonely I was? How much I begged for your attention, and you just brushed me off. You think you were some perfect husband, but you weren't, Danny. You were so busy being responsible that you forgot to actually be with me. I couldn't help but laugh. A harsh, bitter sound, right? So your solution to feeling ignored was to crawl into bed with someone else? Classy. Her face twisted in frustration, and for a moment, she dropped the mask. You don't get it, do you? I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, I said coldly. Over and over again. She paused, searching my face for something. Sympathy, forgiveness, I didn't know. When she didn't find it, her expression hardened again. Fine. If you're going to keep playing the victim, then I don't know why I bothered coming here. Neither do I shot back. The divorce papers will be ready soon. That's the only conversation we have left. Her eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I saw something else in her gaze, something darker. But then she turned on her heel, heading for the door. You're making a mistake, Danny. You're going to regret this. I followed her, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The only mistake I made was trusting you. She didn't respond. She just walked out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, my chest heaving. The encounter had left me shaken, but it also solidified something within me. I was done letting her control the narrative. Melissa was right about one thing: relationships aren't black and white. But this wasn't about shades of gray anymore. It was about boundaries, respect, and knowing when to walk away. I thought I had seen the worst of it. Melissa's lies, her arrogance, her complete lack of remorse. It all seemed like the climax of a terrible chapter in my life. But as it turned out, there was another twist waiting for me. Came in the form of him, James, the man I'd seen across the table from Melissa, touching her arm like he had every right to. The man who sent me that smug, patronizing message about being civil. I should have expected that he wouldn't leave well enough alone, but I underestimated just how bold or stupid he was. It was a Thursday evening, and I was in my driveway, changing the brake pads on my car. I had no plans, no distractions, just the rhythmic clink of tools and the soothing monotony of fixing something broken. A stark contrast to the chaos my personal life had become. That's when I saw him. His sleek black car rolled up to the curb, and he stepped out, dressed like he'd just come from some high-powered meeting. Perfectly tailored suit, polished shoes, that insufferable air of confidence. For a moment, I just stared, unsure if I was hallucinating. But no, it was him, standing at the edge of my driveway, hands in his pockets like he belonged there. Danny, right? He said, striding toward me with a smile that made my blood boil. I stood up slowly, wiping my hands on a rag, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell are you doing here? I thought we should talk, he said, stopping a few feet away. He glanced at the car I was working on, as if judging the scene. Man to man. I couldn't believe the audacity. You've got some nerve showing up here. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Look, I get it. You're angry. You have every right to be. But I think if we just sit down and talk. You think we're going to talk? I cut him off, my voice sharp. After what you've done. After what you and Melissa did. He frowned slightly, like I was the unreasonable one. This doesn't have to be ugly. I care about Melissa, and I know this situation is complicated. But I'm not the enemy here. I stepped closer, my hands tightening into fists. You're standing in my driveway on my property, after destroying my marriage, and you think you're not the enemy? What kind of delusional world do you live in? His smirk faltered, but he didn't back down. Look, Danny, I didn't come here to fight. I came here to make sure we can all move forward. Melissa and I. Stop, I said, cutting him off again. The rage bubbling inside me threatened to spill over, but I held it together. Do not say another word about her. I don't care what you and Melissa think you have. I don't care about your excuses. What I care about is you staying the hell out of my life. He sighed, shaking his head like I was being unreasonable. I don't think you understand. Melissa's not coming back to you. She's made her choice. I'm just trying to make this transition easier. Easier. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet street. You're trying to ease your own guilt. That's all this is. Let me make something clear. I don't need anything from you. Not explanations, not apologies, and definitely not your pathetic attempts to smooth things over. You've done enough damage. James's expression shifted, his calm facade cracking just slightly. You don't have to make this harder than it already is. Get off my property, I said, my voice low and steady. Now. For a moment, I thought he might argue. But then he took a step back, his smirk returning like a shield. You're making a mistake, Danny. I know you're hurt, but you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. James, I said, leaning closer, my voice sharp as a knife. If you don't leave right now, I promise you'll regret it. That seemed to do the trick. He hesitated, then turned and walked back to his car, throwing one last smug look over his shoulder before driving off. I stood there for a long time, fists clenched, chest heaving, trying to calm the storm inside me. It wasn't just about what he'd said. It was the sheer arrogance of it, the way he acted like he'd done nothing wrong, like I was the unreasonable one. This wasn't just about Melissa anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace, my life. And I wasn't going to let either of them take another piece of me. After James's brazen visit, I thought I'd seen the worst of their shamelessness. But Melissa, true to form, had one more move up her sleeve. And this time, she came at me with everything she had. It was a week after James's visit, and I was finally starting to feel like I had a grip on things. My lawyer had drafted the divorce papers, and I was ready to file. Melissa's belongings were boxed up in the garage, waiting for her to pick up. I had even started going to the gym again, channeling my anger into something productive. For the first time in weeks, there was a faint light at the end of the tunnel. Then came the letter. It was delivered to my office, which immediately set off alarms. Melissa knew better than to contact me at work. She'd always made a point of respecting my professional boundaries, until now. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with her name scrawled in elegant handwriting across the front. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter from her lawyer, outlining her demands. Demands. She wanted the house. Not a settlement, not an amicable division of assets, the house. The place I had poured years of work and money into. She claimed she had contributed equally to our life together, and that her emotional investment entitled her to remain in the home. That wasn't all. She also wanted alimony. She argued that her income from her events business wasn't stable enough to sustain her current lifestyle, and that I, as the primary breadwinner, had a responsibility to support her. Support her after everything she had done. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. I barely made it through the rest of the workday, pacing my office like a caged animal. By the time I got home, I was ready to explode. As if on cue, Melissa called. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice cold and sharp. What do you want? Did you get my letter? She asked, her tone casual, as if we were discussing dinner plans. Oh, I got it, I said. And I can't believe even you would stoop this low. Low? She said, feigning innocence. Danny, this is just standard procedure. I deserve my fair share. Your fair share, I barked, my anger finally boiling over. You cheated on me, lied to me, humiliated me, and now you think you deserve the house? Alimony? You've got to be out of your mind. Her tone shifted, taking on that icy edge I'd come to despise. I knew you'd react like this. That's why I had my lawyer draft everything properly. This isn't personal, Danny. It's just business. Business, I repeated, laughing bitterly. You destroy our marriage, throw everything we built in the trash, and now you want to act like this is some kind of negotiation? You've already taken enough from me, Melissa. You're not getting another damn thing. She didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I thought I'd finally shut her up. But then she spoke, her voice dripping with calculated calm. You can fight me on this if you want, but you know how these things go. I have leverage, Danny. The court's going to side with me. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Leverage? What kind of leverage could she possibly have? I gritted my teeth, refusing to give her the satisfaction of hearing my doubt. You don't scare me, Melissa. Maybe you should be, she said, her tone smug now. Remember, I know you, Danny. I know everything about you. And if you want to play hardball, I'm ready. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone, seething. She was bluffing, she had to be. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew quickly, wrapping itself around my thoughts. What was she planning? What was her so-called leverage? That night, I sent everything to my lawyer. The letter, the notes I'd taken during the call, even the history of her affair with James. Hit back. I wrote in my email. Hard. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. The day of the final showdown arrived faster than I expected. My lawyer had worked tirelessly to counter Melissa's outrageous demands, filing a response that dismantled her claims piece by piece. I walked into the mediation room prepared for a fight, but I wasn't prepared for how far she would go. Melissa was already seated when I arrived, her red lipstick and designer blazer, a sharp contrast to the brittle air between us. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, gave me a curt nod. I ignored both of them, taking my seat across the table with my lawyer beside me. The tension was palpable. The mediator, an older man with the patience of a saint, began the session by laying out the terms we needed to discuss. Division of assets, the house, and Melissa's claim for alimony. I listened in silence as her lawyer launched into a carefully crafted argument, painting Melissa as a devoted wife who had sacrificed for our marriage and deserved compensation for her years of support. Took everything I had not to laugh out loud. When it was my lawyer's turn, she didn't hold back. She laid out the facts. Melissa's income from her business was steady and sufficient. Her demand for the house was baseless given the circumstances of our separation, and her affair with James was evidence of bad faith in the marriage. By the time she finished, Melissa's smug facade had cracked. But then came the bombshell. Melissa's lawyer leaned forward, a sly smile playing on her lips. While my client understands that emotions are running high, she would like to present a matter of serious concern regarding Mr. Daniels' behavior. I frowned, exchanging a glance with my lawyer. What the hell is this? I asked. Melissa finally spoke, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. Danny, this isn't easy for me to say, but I think the court should know about your temper. My temper? I echoed, stunned. She nodded, her expression that of a martyr sacrificing herself for the greater good. You've always had a volatile side. I didn't want to bring this up, but after our last conversation, I realized I couldn't stay silent. I felt unsafe before Danny, and I'm worried about how this might escalate. The room went silent. My lawyer leaned over, whispering, "Stay calm. She's baiting you." It took everything in me not to explode. The audacity of her claim was beyond anything I could have imagined. I had never once raised a hand to her or anyone else. But here she was, weaponizing the image of me she knew I'd worked hard to maintain. Calm, steady, reliable. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain composed. That's a lie, I said evenly. And you know it. Melissa's eyes gleamed with triumph. She had gotten the reaction she wanted. Not an outburst, but the sting of denial. Her lawyer quickly piled on, suggesting that her concerns warranted further investigation and could influence the division of assets. I turned to my lawyer. Can we prove this is nonsense? She nodded. We can. Let's get ahead of it. And we did. Over the next hour, my lawyer masterfully exposed Melissa's baseless claims, pointing out the lack of evidence and the timing of her accusations, which conveniently coincided with her failed attempts to secure the house and alimony. When Melissa tried to interject with a tearful plea, the mediator stopped her cold. This is a legal proceeding, not a performance. Stick to the facts. By the end of the session, Melissa's leverage had crumbled. Her lawyer looked deflated, and for the first time, Melissa seemed genuinely rattled. The mediator concluded by recommending a fair split of assets, one that left her with none of the things she had tried to take from me. When the session ended, I stood up, ready to leave this nightmare behind. Melissa lingered by the door, her eyes scanning me with something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Defiance? Whatever it was, it didn't matter anymore. "Danny," she said softly as I passed her. "This isn't how I wanted things to end." I stopped, turning to face her. "You ended this, Melissa. The moment you chose James, the moment you lied, the moment you tried to take everything from me, you ended it." For the first time, her mask slipped. She looked small, fragile, like someone who had finally realized what they'd lost. But it didn't move me. I had nothing left for her. I walked out of that room with my head held high, the weight of her betrayal finally lifting off my shoulders. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. Melissa got a modest settlement, enough to close this chapter for good. But she didn't get the house, the alimony, or my dignity. The day the papers came through, I stood in the empty living room, staring at the sunlight streaming through the windows. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt free.